Ever look at the US government and just think, wow, that's complicated? You're not alone. But here's the thing. At its heart, it's actually built on a pretty simple idea. It's all about separating power into three different groups. In this explainer, we're going to break down exactly what those three branches are and what they really do. So, let's start with the most basic question of all. How does a country even make its rules? Well, before we can get into who does what, we kind of need to understand the what. And it all really boils down to two key ideas: laws and the policies that bring those laws to life.
First up, you've got the law. Super simple, right? A law is just a rule that a government says, hey, this is how it is, and has the power to enforce. It's the foundation of the whole system. Basically, the official instruction manual for how society is going to work.
But, a rule written down on a piece of paper is just words. How does it actually happen in the real world? Well, that's where public policy steps in. The best way to think about it is as the government's game plan. It's all the specific actions and steps it takes to make a law a reality.
Okay, so how does the government juggle all these laws and policies? I want you to imagine the government as a special kind of toolkit. It's a toolkit that has three distinct compartments, and each one holds the tools for a very specific job.
All right, let's open up that toolkit. First up, Section 1, the rule makers. This is like the design and fabrication department. These are the folks responsible for actually creating the tools, the laws that are going to shape the country.
And that job belongs to the legislative branch. Their one main purpose? To be the architects of the nation's rulebook. They're the ones who write the laws.
And their power goes way beyond just day-to-day rules. I mean, the legislative branch holds some of the most serious powers a government can have. They're the ones who can declare war, and this is huge. They control the money. They have the power to impose taxes to pay for, well, everything the government does.
Okay, so the rules are written. The tools have been made, and they're sitting in the toolkit. But a tool is pretty useless until somebody actually picks it up and uses it, right? And that brings us to Section 2, the rule enforcers. This is a great way to remember it. If the legislative branch writes the rule book, it's the executive branch's job to enforce it. They're the ones who take those laws off the paper and put them into action out in the real world.
And besides just day-to-day enforcement, the executive branch has some really unique powers. They can issue what are called executive orders, which are basically directives on how to carry out a policy. They also act as the face of the nation to the rest of the world, handling all that foreign relations stuff by appointing and meeting with ambassadors.
Okay, so we've got our rule makers and our rule enforcers. But hold on. Who makes sure the rules are actually fair? And who decides if they're being applied correctly? That takes us to the final piece of our government toolkit, Section 3, the rule interpreters.
And this is the absolutely critical job of the judicial branch. See, they don't write the laws, and they don't enforce them. Their role is to be the referee. They interpret what a law really means and figure out how it applies in all sorts of real-world situations. So, as the ultimate referees, their powers are all about the legal process itself. They can hear a case from the very beginning, that's what original jurisdiction means, and, so importantly, they can review decisions that were made in lower courts to make sure the law was applied fairly and correctly the first time.
So, we've looked at each compartment of the toolkit on its own: the makers, the enforcers, and the interpreters. Now, let's put the whole thing together. Let's see how it all looks, side by side.
And here it is, the entire system in one single view. You can really see how each branch has its own very clear lane to stay in. The legislative branch, they create the law. The executive branch, they enforce it. And the judicial branch, they interpret it. Just look at how different their key powers are. Making laws has nothing to do with foreign policy, which has nothing to do with hearing a court case. This separation isn't a coincidence. It's the whole point.
So the most important thing to take away from all this is that this division is totally intentional. The whole system was designed so that each branch has its own separate job. And it's this separation of powers that creates balance. It stops any one part of the government from getting too powerful.
So we have this system that's carefully designed for balance. But, that brings up a really fascinating final question. What happens when these incredibly powerful branches don't agree? What happens when they actually clash? Well, that's where the real story of how government works begins, and maybe a topic for another day.